We turn now to the late flurry of legal challenges by the Trump camp today. And to help us break it all down, we bring in ABC News contributor Kate Shaw and Michael Waldman, president of the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law. Thanks so much for joining us. So ABC News has projected that Biden will win Michigan, but the Trump campaign is now challenging that state's vote counting process. Are we likely to see any movement there? And Kate, we'll start with you.
You know, so far, Lindsay, I don't think we're likely to see much traction from the Michigan challenge. So essentially, the Trump campaign seems to be complaining about the way their representatives were given access to observing the vote counting procedures in Michigan. They've made a similar allegation about the state of Pennsylvania. Officials in both states have insisted that they have been remarkably transparent about granting access to their counting procedures. In Pennsylvania, I believe some of those counts were even live streamed for anyone to observe. So right now, all we have are allegations. I haven't seen anything to suggest that those allegations, because of course anyone can make a claim and anyone can file a lawsuit, but I haven't seen anything to suggest that those are likely to get much traction, and certainly nothing that would throw into question the result in, say, a state like Michigan.
And Michael, do you agree with Kate?
I do agree with Kate. The Trump campaign's lawsuits are huffing and puffing, and they seem, at least in some measure, to be designed to look like they're doing something. Filing a lawsuit to demand that you can send your observer to look at something happening that's live streamed does not rise to the level of, Clarence Darrow or something like that. There are other cases that have dubious legal theories, but are wider in their potential impact.
And Trump has also asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on the Pennsylvania mail ballot deadline extension. Do you think that the court, now with a conservative majority, is likely to intervene? And if they do, how might they rule? And Kate, we can start with you.
Well, so remember, the court with a conservative majority already twice actually has been asked to intervene in this Pennsylvania vote. The question of whether ballots that arrive between Tuesday and Friday of this week will still be counted. So that's, again, votes cast by Tuesday, but that might not arrive until Friday. And the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court held that those were valid votes and would be counted. And the U.S. Supreme Court twice refused to disturb that finding. And again, there was already a 5-3 conservative majority on the court that declined to intervene. But of course, you're right, Lindsay, that we now have a 9th member of the court and another conservative member, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and that does potentially change the calculus. So I think it's no surprise that the Trump campaign today has asked to intervene in that suit because it's actually still pending before the Supreme Court. And some of the justices have suggested that they might be open to revisiting the question after, or while the counting is ongoing. And so Pennsylvania officials have actually segregated those ballots that have arrived today or that will continue to arrive until Friday. But my instinct is that it's very unlikely that you would find 5 votes, which is what it takes, to basically throw out ballots that were cast by voters who relied in good faith on what the state Supreme Court told them, which is that their votes would be counted. So I'm just not sure you can count to 5 on that. And as Michael says, that's actually one of the broader challenges that we have seen so far. The rest of the lawsuits we've seen, and there are quite a few that have either been filed or at least threatened, seem to be kind of nibbling around the edges of some of these counting procedures, but don't actually go to kind of the core of the integrity of the count in any state.
And Michael, we asked Kate this question earlier. Are there any legal challenges that you think could impact the results of this election at this point?
Well, that's exactly the right question. In Pennsylvania, of course, as Kate says, the voters didn't only rely on the state Supreme Court, they effectively relied on the U.S. Supreme Court, allowing it to continue twice. Even if in the highly unlikely situation that the Supreme Court ruled on this legal theory and stop the counting of those ballots, the number of absentee ballots in Pennsylvania that are still being counted is so large that it's not clear that that would necessarily affect the result. That's the thing, is the reason we have all these absentee ballots is because we are in the middle of a pandemic. And it's quite an extraordinary thing that we have the highest voter turnout since 1900. It seems pretty clear to me that judges will not be deciding this election in all likelihood. Courts will not, in all likelihood, be deciding this election. The voters already decided it. We're just finding out how they decided it.
And even before Election Day, this was the most litigated election in our history, with different sides filing suits. Do you think that the Biden camp would be bringing the same kind of challenges if the tables were turned today? And Kate, we'll start with you.
You know, Lindsay, I don't. You know, the pre-election challenges and now these post-election challenges have a very particular flavor, and that is largely an attempt to disenfranchise voters that the Trump campaign believes will be Biden voters. You know, there was an op-ed that ran in the Washington Post just a couple of days before the election by top GOP election lawyer Ben Ginsburg. So not a Democratic political operative. This is really the top lawyer on the Republican side of, you know, the last nearly half century. And he described the Trump campaign's strategy as basically a multi-million-dollar effort to disenfranchise voters. And I think that's a fair description of a lot of the lawsuits, essentially trying to find and target populations that the Trump campaign believes will be unfavorable in the votes they cast to the president's reelection prospects, and to try to make it difficult for those individuals to cast their votes. And I just don't think that that's something I can imagine a Democratic candidate, Joe Biden or frankly any other, doing, in part because each party understands its political coalition very differently. I think Democrats believe they will do well at the polls if more people vote, and Republicans, at least in the year 2020, seem to hold the opposite view. And so it's hard for me to see, if the tables were turned in terms of where the sort of who was up and who was down, it's hard for me to see the Biden campaign engaging in this kind of litigation strategy.
Michael, same sentiment?
Yes, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, remember that President Trump said out loud what he really wasn't supposed to say. It was a deviation from the script. He said that what he was really worried about was the level of voting, and he said there would be levels of voting so high that Republicans would never win. And then he remembered that that wasn't what he was supposed to say, and he suddenly piously said he was terribly worried about voter fraud and the great risk of voter fraud. Democrats filed quite a bit of litigation before the election, but they were pretty overwhelmingly efforts to get it to be easier for people to vote. It just happens to be the case right now that that approach at a time of pandemic really was better, I think, for democracy and for making it so that people could actually have their voices heard in this rather extraordinary circumstance.
Kate Shaw and Michael Waldman, we thank you both so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.